Hi YouTube, welcome to Geek Culture, and I'm going to be sharing with you a list of my favourite toys from my childhood. As you can see from the displays behind me, I obviously love toys, especially these days it's more the collectible toys, but for this list I'm going to be going back to the late 70s, the 80s, and maybe even verging into the early 90s to talk about my favourite toys as I was growing up. I'm going to start with a few sort of honourable mentions of toys that I certainly have memories of playing with or owning, but I don't have too much information to share about them because they are quite vague memories. Certainly there was the Black Hole movie. I remember playing with some of the toys from that. There was the Battlestar Galactica TV series. It's a little sort of space dog, which was kind of cool. Muffet, I think it was called Muffet. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And I guess the ones I probably remember the most was from Buck Rogers. I remember the Tweaky figure. He was one of my favourites. There was a couple of animated series from the 80s that had a really cool toy range, such as Mask and Centurions. I remember playing with them toys. I don't actually recall if I owned any of them or whether I just played with somebody else's collection, but certainly I've got fond memories of those, but again, not enough to go into any great detail about them. I remember having a figure of the Lone Ranger in his blue suit with a white hat, and the last I remember, I'm pretty sure he was missing a limb or two, and he ended up down the side of the neighbour's fence. There was a craze of sorts, which I would say is in the 80s. I want to say it's in the 80s. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. And it was Smurfs. I've got a lovely memory of the Smurfs because my granddad and my mum and dad, if they'd ever go near a chemist, and I don't know why it was a chemist that did it, but certainly our local chemist used to sell the Smurfs. And every so often they'd pop near the chemist and they'd come back with a new Smurf. I don't really remember playing with the Smurfs very much. Perhaps I did, maybe I've just forgotten. But certainly collecting the set of the Smurfs was a really cool little craze at one point. Another quick mention is the Game & Watch little handheld toys. These were little sort of handheld games of the day, way before your DS's and your Game Boys even. I've got really fond memories of getting, either for my birthday or for Christmas, one of these games in particular, which I think is this one. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with these games. And I remember a similar sort of LCD game that I got at one point of Back to the Future. I think it was probably Back to the Future 3 that I got. I remember playing that as well. But yeah, I was a fan of these, and obviously this led into the Game Boy and all the other crazes, which I'll probably go into in another video. And that's the end of my honourable mentions. Before I actually go into the list, I think one thing that many people from my generation will probably remember was the Index or the Argos catalogues. And the way that they relate to toys is, of course, that I would always look forward to the autumn and winter catalogue because there would always be a bumper crop of toys pages to flick through, seeing all the new toys in the new toy ranges coming out. You'd probably get like 8, 9, 10 pages full of toys, as opposed to the rather boring spring summer catalogue that they'd put out with like 2 or 3 pages. So I just have fond memories of probably dashing into the Index or the Argos when the new catalogue came out and taking one home and just sort of feasting my eyes on all the toys that were coming out in the toy ranges. I briefly mentioned the Game Boy before, and I'm not going to go into any great detail about video games of the day because I think that's pretty much a whole other video that I can do at some point. But certainly my computer was a really big toy, if you can call it a toy, that I really enjoyed playing with and doing some very, very basic programming on back in the day. We had a VIC-20, the Commodore VIC-20, which did the job and had some good games on it, but then we progressed shortly after that onto the Spectrum 128K, the one with the built-in tape deck at the end. But yeah, I'd love doing little bits of basic programming and playing all the classic games on those computers. And again, I'm not going to go into any detail because I'm pretty sure I'm probably going to do a video about it at some point, so I won't do any spoilers. I have really good memories of a really obscure toy that many of you may not have heard of or remember, and I'll be really interested to hear in the comments if anybody has heard of this. My brother and I used to nip down to a local store in our village we grew up in, and we'd spend, I'm pretty sure it was 50p at the time, on an action figure, and it was from the range of Action Jacks. I guess these were like a slightly smaller version of your kind of G.I. Joe action figures. And I just have really fond memories of playing with these figures and collecting the set, and I'm pretty sure we had a vehicle or two as well. And they always came with really cool little weapons and items that you could use with them. And earlier this year, I actually stumbled across, in a charity shop, in a bin that was marked as free, I found 2 Action Jacks figures, originals in the boxes, complete and with all the accessories and everything that comes with them. Yeah, I picked one of these up for me, and I picked one up for my brother. These were amazing, such incredible memories, and the pictures at the top as well of all the other figures that were available in the range. Action Jacks, I just love these. One of my favourite series growing up was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and collecting the figures was another joy. I have fond memories of getting Snake Mountain, either for my birthday or for Christmas. I loved that. I loved the springy, bouncy Ram Man. That was great. Orko was probably one of my favourite toys. I remember buying that. I think it was with my own money as well. It had a little pull that you pulled, and then it scuttled along the table. And I always loved the Cringer and the accessories that turned him into Battle Cat. Yeah, such amazing memories of He-Man figures. So much so, in fact, that I couldn't help myself when I recently found some He-Man and the Masters of the Universe figures, which are made in a very similar mold to the original figures. They are slightly different. I've got another video in which I've unboxed those, so check that out. But yeah, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was definitely up there as one of my favourite toys. Certainly in the mid-80s, I really loved Subbuteo. I loved football as a kid, not so much now. I'm not really into football anymore, but I loved it as a kid. There was just something about rolling out that pitch, putting your goals out, the stadium, piecing all that together, the little tiny people that sit in the stadium, and then just getting your teams out, sliding them out of that green box they'd come in. It was just an amazing game, and just so much fun as well. I remember myself and some friends and my brother, we all had little tournaments in the back garden. There was a bird that pooed in the penalty box. In 1986, the largest part of my Christmas present was Subbuteo, but unfortunately I got hit by a car on the last day of term before Christmas and ended up in hospital over Christmas, and I was unable to play with any of my new toys. I remember laying out a small segment of the pitch on a table in front of me in hospital. I was in traction with a broken leg, so I couldn't get out of bed to play with it. But I remember laying out a tiny bit and just flicking a few figures around it, and my family brought in a picture that they'd taken of my brother with it all laid out so I could see what it all looked like. But yeah, Subbuteo, I have great memories of that as a child. My brother and I had a massive collection of G.I. Joe action figures as we were growing up. These were the sort of the smaller figures, not like the 12-inch ones. I just got great memories of Duke and Roadblock, Cobra Commander, all the Cobra Troopers, the blue ones, and Zartan, and all the amazing characters from the series, all brought to life in those figures. And we played with them so much. I remember, in fact, there was 2 shelves at the bottom of one of our wardrobes which got turned into a G.I. Joe base. And we had some of the vehicles we put in there, and we drew on in like a permanent marker, sort of like a little helipad bay, and we drew on the walls like all the sort of decor from inside the base. But yeah, absolutely loved G.I. Joe, and one of my friends at the time as well, he had more figures than we did, so we'd often go around there and we'd play with all the figures that we didn't have. But I guess the sad end to the G.I. Joe tale is that we had a massive box. It was actually one of my mum's old vanity cases, and it just sat in our loft for years and years and years, until probably somewhere around 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, when my brother and I decided it was time to put them on eBay. and we sold them all.
What a pisser.
And I'm kind of gutted now, so I've got my 5-year-old son and I'd love him to be able to enjoy them as I did. The next toy on my list is Playmobil. I remember having a big Playmobil collection as a kid. I had various vehicles, and I have incredible memories of a Christmas when I received a Playmobil hospital, which was sort of made out of cardboard. I guess these days it'd be all plastic, but back then it was like a cardboard Playmobil hospital, and I absolutely loved that. I got these memories of all the little sort of moving parts on it and the doorways and the way that all worked. Absolutely loved that. I have this memory of being on a caravan holiday in Wales, and I seem to recall that I'd buried some of my Playmobil people in the land at the back of the caravan, and from what I remember, I never found them again. So that's always stuck in there as an obscure memory. But yeah, Playmobil, loved them. And nowadays, you know, I've got my collectible Playmobil Ghostbusters, as I said earlier, my A-Team, my Back to the Future. I always kind of hoped my son would get into Playmobil, but for whatever reason he never really did. He certainly likes to play under strict supervision, of course, with my Ghostbusters and my other toys. But yeah, Playmobil definitely up there as one of my favourites. The next toy which I'm going to talk briefly about, I'm definitely going to put in a video all of its own because it's something that's very close to my heart, and it's been a big part of my life, is board games, and I guess card games would fall into that category as well. I absolutely loved games when I was growing up, like I guess all your classics like Connect 4, Downfall, Go for Broke, Game of Life. I've got memories of games like Hotel. I love that game with the stand-up hotels and the little plastic moulded lodges and things. I love that game. I love games like Escape from Atlantis, Lost Valley of Dinosaurs, the way they'd bring everything to life in 3D. Ghost Castle was another 3D game which I really loved, and I've got good memories of, although parts of it usually fell apart all the time. And that little skull that you'd drop down and it'd go down the chute and sort of knock over one of the figures. And I also sort of verged into, I guess, what I would these days call gamer games. And I guess one of the first introductions into something that was a little bit more than just your regular board game was called Dark Tower, for anybody that remembers this from MB Games. It literally had a black electronic tower that had a little display that would spin around, and it would show you different images depending on what events happened to you during the game as you moved around a giant board that sort of encircled it, and it would spin round to the player, and the player would put their choice of what they wanted to do in it. And considering it was the 80s, it was a pretty amazing game. I had little sort of very digitized sound effects on it as well. But Dark Tower was just amazing. I absolutely loved that game. And after Dark Tower, I sort of verged into the world of Games Workshop. I was a little bit older when I started doing all the painting the lead miniatures and all that sort of stuff, and the Warhammer 40,000 and the Warhammer role-playing game, the fantasy role-playing game. I did all of that, but I also did a lot of the Games Workshop classic board games, many of which went out of print way before the end of the 90s arrived. Thinking of things like Kings and Things, The Fury of Dracula, Blockmania, Judge Dredd, Chainsaw Warrior. Those games really do sort of hold a special place in my heart. Again, I'm going to do another video at some point about board games, because all of these games and my love of games sort of turned me into a games designer, and I've sort of published some games on the internet. Games has been a massive part of my life, and at the moment I'm actually in the process of working with somebody in South America who's hoping to release one of my own card games that I've designed. So fingers crossed that all pans out and that gets released, and when it does, I'll probably put a video about it on here for you as well. So yeah, board games were definitely a massive part of my childhood, and definitely led into adulthood as well. I have amazing memories of my collection of Action Man figures.
Now with eagle eyes that actually move.
I remember playing with the Action Man sort of zip line tower. That was great. I had an Action Man truck, a huge Action Man truck, which we bought from a sort of discount store in Urmston near Manchester. I remember specifically going to Terry's, the store, and buying that massive truck. Absolutely loved that truck. I think I probably used it as some kind of Indiana Jones style, being dragged under the truck type of a toy. I remember my brother getting a paratrooper Action Man and sort of throwing him out the back window, and I'm pretty sure something snapped when it landed and the parachute didn't work very well. Oops. There was a guy who lived around the corner from us, and we'd often go around his house Most probably, if I'm really being honest, because he had an amazing collection of figures that we didn't have, so we'd often go around to play with his Action Man figures. Getting really close now to the top of my list, and as you can tell, I'm a big Transformers fan, massively into the Generation 1 Transformers cartoons. And the weird thing is, the toys didn't look particularly like the cartoons in a lot of instances, particularly like Ironhide and Ratchet were pretty abysmal as likenesses go. But when you're a kid, you're just seeing Ratchet off the TV series, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, Transformers was always a massive favourite of mine. Learning to transform it in the multiple steps. My son is 5, he's an absolutely massive Transformers fan, and he's not into the new Transformers stuff, it's all the G1 stuff, so clearly I'm guilty of the influence there. But yeah, he loves Transformers. I did unfortunately sell all mine on a car boot.
This could very well be the stupidest person on the face of the earth.
I did go through a weird phase, I think, in my sort of early teens of going around car boots and buying back Transformers that I'd sold at some point, or perhaps ones that I never had. I remember getting Blitzwing and Springer were 2 favourites that I really liked. But yeah, just amazing memories of Transformers toys. My second favourite toy from my childhood has got to be my Star Wars figures. Good. That were pretty much everywhere at the end of the 70s and the early 80s as the movies were released. Just amazing memories of those figures. And in fact, my first figure was Chewbacca. I think my brother bought the Han Solo figure. But yeah, Star Wars was just amazing. We had lots of the playsets. We had the Hoth playset, the Star Destroyer playset. I even remember a guy from school had the big Death Star set as well, which we'd often go around and play with. I remember taking my Snowspeeder and little Tauntaun figures. We even had a Tauntaun that sort of opened up so you could shove a figure inside, like when Han slices the Tauntaun open in Empire Strikes Back. Like going out into the snow with all those snow figures. We had an AT-ST, I seem to remember, but we never quite had the AT-AT, which a guy over the road had, so I'd, again, go and play with his. Star Wars figures, definitely well up there as one of my all-time most favourite toys. And finally, the number 1 favourite toy from my childhood simply has to be Lego.
Hello there. For
me, Lego was just the ultimate toy. The toy you could build the set that you bought from the shops, but then you could turn it into a million different things. It was just so damn addictive. I remember there was like a chest of drawers in my brother's room, and the bottom drawer, pull it out, it was literally full of Lego. One of my pet peeves from that particular era, in fact, which has just come back to me, was that there'd always be some little non-Lego pieces in there that I think some aunt or uncle or someone must have bought as a little Lego set that wasn't actual legit Lego. And I guess back in them days, people weren't allowed to release Lego sets that were compatible with Lego, so none of the pieces would fit, and every time I'd find one in my drawer, I'd sort of curse and shove it to the side. The Lego that I had as a child lived in bin bags in the loft of various houses that I've lived in over the years. And I brought it down a few years back when my son sort of graduated from Duplo to big boy Lego. And now nearly every day I'm playing Lego with him and finding and using all these old pieces that I had when I was a kid. You know, I've talked on this video about some of the toys that I've got rid of on car boots or on eBay. And the one toy that I decided to keep hold of was Lego. And I'm so pleased about that, because to see my son playing with all the Lego that I grew up with is just amazing. And yes, I did search through the bag before I gave it to my son, and I took out all of those non-Lego pieces and I binned them. Yeah, I've got memories of certain sets that I bought, some of which, you know, I'd go to the bank and withdraw my own money, and it felt like a really massive thing to spend my own money on a big Lego set. I remember there was a Lego hospital that I bought that had a little Lego ambulance included in there, and a Lego house that I bought. But yeah, Lego was just amazing, and you could bring anything to life. I'd use Lego to bring to life whatever series I was watching at the time, whether it was Star Wars or Back to the Future or whatever it was. In fact, I remember taking one of the black minifig bodies and using Tipp-Ex to draw a white line down the middle to make Han Solo's jacket. I did find that in the Lego bag that I pulled out of the loft, and I swiftly binned that. I guess one of my bizarre obsessions with Lego was in the late 80s. I was obsessed with the TV series Neighbours. And I actually built a rather large mini replica of Ramsay Street with all of the main houses on there, with little sort of working garages, and they were pretty realistic from what I remember. I even remember my brother and his friends would often wind me up because I'd leave the room and one of them would be like teetering with a foot right near one of my favourite houses on the street.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
And occasionally somebody would actually put a foot through one of the houses and I would go absolutely ballistic. But yeah, Lego is definitely my all-time favourite toy. And as I said, it's one that I play with pretty much on a daily basis now with my son. In fact, there's been occasions that my son and I, as I did as a child, have used Lego to make Transformers, actual transforming toys using Lego. And there have been occasions lately when I've been working on one with my son and then he's gone to bed and I've just slipped downstairs and continued making and playing with Lego for a couple of hours after he's gone to bed. So I guess, as I said earlier, I don't play with toys now, I just collect them. But maybe when it comes to Lego, I can break that rule. And that brings me to the end of this video. I'd love to hear in the comments below what toys you loved as a child, as you were growing up. If there was any on my list that you really loved as well, or if there was any on there that I've not listed that you were obsessed with as a child, please share your comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, drop a comment below. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. And I'll see you next time.